The harsh light of the orbital prison gleamed through the viewport, cold and sterile. Above Enveric Prime, a barren, war-ravaged planet far below, the prison station hung like a gargoyle in space. It was an ugly, functional place designed to hold the galaxy's worst, and now it housed something much worse. Ambassador Kryn, an AI diplomat whose data contained secrets that could ignite a galactic war. The mission was supposed to be simple, until it wasn't. A dozen teams had already failed, trying to infiltrate the prison, only to vanish without a trace. The Umbra Protocol unit stood in the briefing room, the dim light above flickering like a dying star. "Listen up." Commander Farson's voice was smooth, but there was a faint tremor. "This is the 11th attempt. 11. Every other squad's either been shredded or lost to the station's defenses. The team, a mix of cyborgs, genetically enhanced warriors, and battle-hardened operatives, stood at attention. They were a well-oiled machine, bred for precision, efficiency, and cold logic. They didn't need to be here. They knew the numbers. Kryn was beyond extraction. Then, the door slid open, and in walked a human, Staff Sergeant Riley Voss. She was tall, but her presence seemed smaller, more unassuming, with her easy grin and wild, unkempt hair. Her uniform was standard, but her weapon, an old scratched-up plasma rifle, was a relic. The silence in the room thickened. The squad exchanged glances. Voss' reputation preceded her, though it wasn't what you call heroic. More like reckless, unpredictable, and irrational came up in most of the reports. "You all know the drill," Commander Farson said, his tone colder than usual. "High-value target extraction. The prisoner is Ambassador Kryn. Don't screw this up." He turned to Voss, who leaned against the wall casually, her arms folded. "I'm sorry, did you just say don't screw this up?" Voss' voice was laced with sarcasm. "Because I totally have a track record of never screwing up." She shot a wry grin around the room. The silence stretched. Voss was clearly the wild card here, the variable no one could predict. She was human, a strange species by the standards of everyone else in the room, and humanity had never been known for its predictability. But that was why they needed her. Farson's eyes narrowed. "We'll be dropping into the prison via stealth transport. Droids, exo-armored infantry, and every kind of automated defense you can think of will be waiting for us. Your job is to make sure we don't get obliterated." Voss stretched, cracking her neck. "Sounds like a really fun day at the office. What's the plan?" The room stilled. The cyborgs and enhanced soldiers looked at each other, confused. They had no contingency plan for her. "We'll infiltrate the lower decks, bypassing most of the security systems," the lead tactician, Strathak, said. His voice was low and precise, like a blade being drawn across stone. "The extraction point is here." He pointed at a hologram of the prison's inner structure. Voss raised an eyebrow. "And if they spot us?" Strathak didn't respond, but the implication was clear. If they were spotted, they wouldn't stand a chance. The mission was a one-way ticket. Voss grinned, shrugging off the tension. "Guess I'll just have to make sure they don't, huh?" The rest of the team stiffened, their eyes narrowing. They had their doubts about Voss, but one thing was clear. She'd just made this mission about more than just data. This was going to be a test of survival, and humanity's unpredictable streak had a way of defying the odds. "All right, squad," Voss said, her voice suddenly steely. "Let's go give them something they'll never forget." The door slid shut behind them, and as they moved toward the transport bay, the stakes of the mission became clear. This wasn't about logic or cold calculation. This was about doing the impossible. The humans had a habit of making the impossible look easy. The stealth ship hummed with the quiet efficiency of a machine designed to vanish. Inside, the team was a mix of tense silence and calculated movements. The low light flickered over their armored forms, each soldier a blend of precision and cold purpose. Voss, on the other hand, was leaning back in her seat, her feet kicked up on a console, tapping her fingers to the beat of an unheard song. Commander Tharson stood at the helm, his eyes scanning the navigation readouts. "Approaching Enveric Prime's atmosphere," he muttered, his fingers dancing over the control panel. "We should be undetected. The storm clouds will help mask our entry." Sir Thak, the team's tactical leader, stood behind him, watching the flickering data. "The moment we break the clouds, the station's sensor net will lock onto us. This will only work if we remain undetected for the next 5 minutes." "That's a big if," Voss piped up, her voice light, but laced with amusement. "What happens if we get detected?" "The ship will be torn apart by automated defenses before we even make it to the station," Sir Thak replied coldly. Voss smirked, her eyes twinkling with a strange mix of challenge and excitement. "Well then, we'll just have to make sure we don't get detected." Tharson shot her a sharp glance. "We'll rely on the ship's cloaking protocols. If we break formation, you will leave me behind," Voss finished, grinning. Yeah, don't worry. I've got this." The tension was palpable. Voss, despite her carefree attitude, had a reputation for pushing things too far, and everyone in the room knew it. But there was something else, something they couldn't deny. When it came to unpredictability, Voss was a force of nature. She had an uncanny ability to think outside the box, and when logic failed, her gut instinct often carried them through. It was that very unpredictability that had earned her a place here, despite their reluctance. The ship began its descent toward the prison station, passing through layers of swirling storm clouds. Lightning crackled outside, casting brief, violent flashes of light. The quiet hum of the engines was almost drowned out by the booming thunder, but the ship's systems maintained their silence. The cloaking field worked like a charm, masking them from the prying eyes of the station's sensors. Then, without warning, the ship shuddered. A sharp beep echoed through the cabin. The navigational display blinked red, a warning flashing on the screen. "Something's not right," Tharson muttered, furrowing his brow. "Talk to me," Voss said, suddenly alert. "We're being scanned," Tharson said, his voice tight. "It's an anomaly in the storm. The sensors can't lock on, but the frequency's all wrong." Sir Thak's voice was low and calculated. "We're in their blind spot. The storm's electromagnetic fields are interfering with their scans." "But not for long," Voss interrupted. She stood abruptly, pushing past Sir Thak to the controls. "You're thinking too much. If we don't make a move now, we'll be sitting ducks. Do you have a plan?" Tharson's voice was steady, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Voss didn't hesitate. She tapped a few buttons, overriding the ship's automated system. "Trust me. I'm good at this." With a decisive motion, she yanked the control yoke, sending the ship veering into a sharp, evasive dive. The ship jolted violently, throwing the crew against their harnesses, but Voss held firm, her focus razor-sharp. Outside the viewport, the world tilted. The storm howled around them as the ship spiraled downward through the chaos of lightning and dark clouds. The ship's cloaking field flickered, distorting as it tried to keep up with the erratic movements. For a moment, it seemed like they were plummeting toward a fiery death. But then, just as suddenly as the storm had gripped them, the turbulence ceased. The ship had cut through the storm, now hovering in the shadowed, abandoned part of the prison station. The cloak stabilized. "Nicely done, Sergeant," Tharson muttered, his voice rough with disbelief. Voss grinned. "Told you I had it covered." The team exchanged uneasy glances. There was no doubt in their minds now. Whatever this mission was, it wasn't going to follow the script. And that was exactly what they needed. The interior of the prison station was far colder than Voss had expected. The air was stale, tinged with the faint smell of rust and oil. A dull greenish hue bathed the walls, flickering under weak emergency lights. The team had touched down without incident, their ship now hidden in a dark alcove beneath the station's exterior. The only sounds were the soft hum of machinery and the faint echo of footsteps on the metallic floor. "Stay sharp," Commander Farson whispered, his voice low but commanding. "We're not out of the woods yet." Voss adjusted her plasma rifle and stepped forward, the familiar weight of the weapon reassuring in her hands. She'd never been much for stealth, but this wasn't the time for her usual brash tactics. The mission demanded subtlety, and that was a rare currency in her world. Sirthak, the tactical leader, led the way down a narrow corridor. His eyes flicked constantly to the shadows, scanning for any sign of movement. Behind him, the squad followed in tight formation. Enhanced soldiers, quiet and deadly, their boots barely making a sound as they moved. Voss glanced at the others, her mind still spinning from the crazy maneuver that had gotten them this far. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, though she kept that thought to herself. "Access point is ahead," Sirthak murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the station. The narrow corridor opened into a larger room, filled with rows of old, malfunctioning surveillance screens. It was an obvious blind spot, something the team could use to their advantage. "Not much security for such a high-value target," Voss muttered, eyes scanning the dim room. It seemed too easy. "Don't let your guard down," Farson cautioned, but even he seemed a little unsettled. The fact that the station had been so quiet made it feel wrong. Without waiting, Sirthak approached a terminal, his fingers flying over the console's surface. The lights above flickered as he hacked into the system, bypassing the security protocols with a series of swift keystrokes. The door to the main access corridor slid open with a soft hiss. The team moved forward, Voss leading the way this time. Her instincts told her something wasn't right, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The silence was too deep, the absence of alarms, the lack of any patrols. It all felt off. Then suddenly, a low, metallic hum filled the air. It started soft, almost inaudible, but rapidly grew louder. The walls seemed to vibrate with the sound. "Trap," Sirthak growled, eyes wide. "It's a decoy." Voss spun around just in time to see the flicker of movement down the corridor behind them, hundreds of tiny red lights flashing to life. The sound of drones powering up filled the air. "I knew it," Voss muttered under her breath. She raised her rifle and fired, the plasma bolt lighting up the darkened hallway, but it barely fazed the incoming drones. The rest of the team was already reacting. Guns raised, bodies shifting into defensive positions. The drones emerged from hidden alcoves along the walls, their glowing eyes fixed on the team with unerring precision. "Focus fire," Farson barked, his voice commanding as always. He opened fire, his weapon spraying deadly bursts of energy toward the nearest drone. Each shot hit its mark, but the drones were fast, dodging, weaving, and firing back with pinpoint accuracy. Voss moved, faster than she thought possible, weaving between the strikes of plasma and drones. She tossed a grenade, one of the old-fashioned, manually timed ones, just as she ducked behind cover. The explosion rang out, sending a ripple through the corridor and taking out 3 drones in one go. But there were too many. "Fall back," Farson shouted, already turning to retreat. "We need to get to the extraction point. Now." Voss didn't hesitate. She sprinted down the hallway, weaving around exploding drones and dodging their deadly fire. Her heart pounded in her chest as she heard the whine of more drones closing in from behind. But as she turned the corner, she stopped dead in her tracks. Ahead of her stood something no one expected, a massive bulkhead, reinforced by an inch of steel and locked tight. Kryn was supposed to be on the other side, but now it was clear. They'd walked straight into the heart of a trap, the real prison. Voss cursed under her breath. They weren't just here to extract an ambassador. They were here to survive, and if they didn't get out of there fast, survival wasn't going to be an option. The bulkhead slammed shut behind them, sealing them off from the rest of the station with a hiss of hydraulic pressure. Voss stood motionless for a moment, her breath coming in short bursts as she peered through the chaos. The team was pinned in a tight corner of the station's lower decks, surrounded by the flashing lights of drones, and the screeching alarms that seemed to echo off the cold metal walls. "Well, this is just fantastic," Voss muttered, scanning the narrow passage ahead. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid scent of burnt circuitry lingering in the atmosphere. Commander Tharson didn't waste time with words. "Sirthak, how far are we from the central core?" Sirthak's face was a mask of concentration as his fingers flew over his wrist console, pulling up maps and tactical data. "2 decks below us," he said, voice clipped. "But that's assuming the station's layout hasn't shifted. If it's been restructured since the last intel drop, we're on our own." Tharson nodded. "Then we'll go in blind. No time to waste. The sooner we get to Kryn, the better." "Not that I don't appreciate the sense of urgency," Voss said, her rifle held tightly in her hands. "But have you guys noticed we're literally surrounded by angry drones? And—" she paused, looking at the flashing red lights above them. "Oh yeah. There's that lovely countdown until the station's internal defense systems go live." "Shut it, Voss," Tharson snapped, his voice hard with command. "We move now." The sound of mechanical whirring grew louder, a swarm of drones circling around the corner behind them. Voss could feel the tension building, a gnawing sense of inevitability in the air. They were running out of time. "Let's get moving." Tharson barked again, and they sprinted down the narrow passage, weapons ready, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Ahead of them, the station's walls loomed like a labyrinth, stark and unwelcoming. Each corner they rounded seemed to reveal more drones, their metallic forms skittering forward with lethal intent. Voss fired a shot, taking out one of the flying units with a direct hit, but more kept coming, fast, relentless, and impossible to outrun. "We need an exit," Voss shouted over the cacophony of laser fire. "We're not going to make it through the whole station." "We don't need an exit," Sirthak called back, his voice sharp. "We need to overload their security systems. Disrupt their communication network long enough for us to get to the core. I can hack into the station's mainframe, but it's a long shot. We'll need cover." Voss didn't wait for more details. She had already turned and fired another round, blasting a drone out of the sky. "Cover's what I do best," she muttered. "Let's hope this works." The team reached a junction, and without hesitation, Tharson split the group into 2. "Voss, with me. Sirthak, get to the terminal. Now." Voss nodded, her face set in determination. She wasn't sure how they'd get out of this, but she knew one thing. She wasn't about to let her squad down. Not now. They reached the first security terminal, a large, hulking piece of equipment that buzzed with power. Voss leaned against the wall, her rifle aimed toward the corridor they'd just come from. Drones were closing in fast. "Go," Tharson said, urging her to keep an eye out. He turned his attention to the terminal, already working his way through the keypad, pulling up firewalls and scrambling data codes. The silence between them was brief, but in that quiet moment, Voss could feel it. The weight of the mission, the weight of every decision that had led them to this point. She heard the whir of approaching drones, their ominous presence growing louder. The first one rounded the corner, and she squeezed the trigger, the plasma bolt hitting its core and sending it crashing to the floor in a shower of sparks. "Tharson, hurry," Voss yelled, her voice strained as more drones flooded into the corridor. She fired again, taking down another. Tharson's eyes flicked toward her, then back to the terminal. "I'm almost in. Just keep them off me for another few seconds." Voss didn't respond. She was too busy shooting. The next few moments were a blur. Laser blasts zipping past her, the sharp, crackling sounds of drones being torn apart by gunfire, and the rapid thudding of her heart. Each second felt like an eternity. Finally, Tharson grunted. "Done. We've got a window. Move." Without hesitation, Voss darted forward, leading the way as they rushed toward the next section of the station. But as they ran, the ground shook beneath them, and the entire station seemed to groan with tension. The countdown had reached 0, and the station's alarms erupted into chaos. "Here we go," Voss muttered, grinning despite the chaos. Let's make it count. The moment the countdown hit 0, everything changed. The station's alarms blared louder, the shrill sound echoing through the corridors like an angry beast woken from its slumber. Red lights flashed with blinding intensity, casting everything in a terrifying crimson glow. The rumble beneath their feet intensified, the structure groaning as if the prison itself was preparing to collapse in on them. Voss pushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest, but her mind was clear. There was no time to second-guess now. The team was scattered, moving fast through the maze of narrow hallways, each of them a potential death trap. Behind her, the sound of drones revving to life filled the air. A high-pitched screech cut through the chaos as automated turrets dropped from the ceiling, targeting them with lethal precision. But Voss was already moving, her instincts kicking in like a well-worn machine. She ducked behind a support beam, plasma rifle at the ready, and fired, again and again, taking down one drone after another with deadly accuracy. "We need to keep pushing." Tharson's voice came through her earpiece, tight with urgency. "The core's just ahead. There's no turning back now." Voss didn't need to be told twice. She bolted forward, her boots slamming against the cold metal floor, the weight of her rifle a reassuring constant. The team was still in formation, fighting their way through the flood of drones and automated defenses that seemed to pour out from every corner. But the closer they got to the core, the more intense the resistance became. "Keep moving," Sirfak shouted, his voice barely audible over the gunfire and explosions. A drone came at Voss from the left, its claws reaching for her, but she was faster. She leaped to the side, rolling to her feet, and fired, a clean shot to its center, and the drone collapsed in a heap of twisted metal. The hallway ahead opened into a massive chamber. The central core was within sight, a massive glowing engine that pulsed with energy. But it wasn't just the core they were after. It was the control room that sat at its heart, the place where Kryn was being held. If they could reach it, they could finally finish the mission. The door to the control room was locked, and a blast of static crackled in Voss's ear. "I'm in position," Sirfak said. "Cover me. I'm bypassing the security locks." Voss's eyes flicked around, scanning the room for threats. The drones were starting to regroup, swarming in like a deadly hive. There was no time for hesitation. "We're almost there," Voss shouted, her voice sharp with adrenaline. "Cover fire. Now." As Tharson and the others began laying down suppressing fire, Voss sprinted toward the door, dodging plasma blasts and ducking under falling debris. The room around them felt like a battlefield, a blur of fire and metal, each moment more chaotic than the last. Sirfak's voice broke through the chaos again. 5 seconds, just 5 more seconds. Voss could see him, crouched in front of the terminal, his fingers flying over the console. Behind him, the door to the control room slowly began to open, revealing the dimly lit interior. Then, just as Voss thought they might make it, the ground trembled again. This time, it wasn't just the station shaking. It was a deep, vibrating thrum that ran through the walls. The core's power surged, and the lights flickered violently. The room seemed to tilt, as if the entire structure was being pulled apart. "Get inside," Tharson barked. "Now." Voss didn't wait. She threw herself into the control room, taking cover behind a row of terminals. Tharson and the others followed, their weapons still raised, scanning for any sign of danger. They were in, but Kryn was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the room was filled with screens displaying rows of encrypted data. A faint hum emanated from the center of the room, and as Voss looked around, her gut twisted with realization. "Where is she?" Voss demanded. "Where's Kryn?" Sirfak's eyes flicked to the central terminal. "This isn't just a prison. It's a containment unit. Kryn's data is embedded in the core's systems. We'll need to decrypt it. This wasn't an extraction mission. This is a rescue." Before anyone could respond, the doors slammed shut behind them, locking them in. The hum of the core intensified, and the walls began to pulse with an eerie, unnatural energy. "We're running out of time," Voss said, her voice low. "Let's finish this." The walls of the control room pulsed with a strange, rhythmic beat, as though the entire station had a heartbeat of its own. The lights above flickered erratically, casting long shadows across the group as they gathered near the central terminal. The air felt thick with tension, every member of the team aware that the seconds were slipping away fast. "Stay alert," Tharson said, his voice tight with focus. "We've made it this far, but we're not out of danger yet. Srfak, can you get the encryption key from this system?" Srfak was already at the terminal, his fingers dancing over the interface. His eyes were locked onto the screen, his face illuminated by the ghostly glow of the data streaming across it. "It's complex. This is beyond basic encryption. Someone's deliberately locking down the data. This isn't just a prison. It's a trap." Voss scanned the room, her senses heightened. She knew better than to trust anything about this mission. Something didn't feel right. The lack of security personnel. The way the drones had arrived too perfectly timed. She had suspected it before, but now it was clear. They weren't just here to extract Kryn. They were bait. The air grew colder, the hum from the core intensifying. It was as if the station itself was waking up, reacting to their presence. Voss could feel her heartbeat in her throat, a primal instinct telling her they were running out of time, running out of options. "Tharson," Voss said, her voice a whisper, but urgent. "We're not alone. There's something else here." Tharson's gaze flicked to her, but he didn't hesitate. "Stay focused, Voss. We need that key." She nodded, but her eyes darted to the flickering lights. She wasn't sure what it was. Maybe it was the feeling of being watched, or maybe it was the unsettling silence that had fallen over the station. But something was closing in on them. Slowly, methodically. Srfak muttered under his breath, frustration creeping into his voice. "This is taking too long. I can't break through without alerting the system. The core is too tightly locked down." A loud crack echoed from the far corner of the room, followed by a low mechanical whirring. Voss snapped her head toward the noise. From the shadows emerged a silhouette, a figure stepping into the light, tall and imposing, its movements eerily fluid. The figure was clad in sleek, reflective armor, the surface shimmering like a ghostly mirror. Its helmet was featureless, no eyes, no mouth, nothing but smooth, polished metal. "An android," Voss whispered, her hand tightening on her rifle. "No, this is different." The figure didn't speak, but its presence seemed to fill the room, its stance predatory. Another figure emerged from the shadows, and another, and then another. More of them. A dozen sleek, humanoid machines now surrounded the team, each one perfectly silent, their motion fluid but deliberate. They weren't just androids. They were hunters, crafted for one purpose: to eliminate any threat. Voss's pulse quickened, adrenaline flooding her system. She spun toward Srfak. "What the hell are these things?" Srfak didn't answer. His eyes were wide, locked on the lead android. "No, this isn't just security. They've been here the whole time, hidden in plain sight." Tharson stepped forward, his voice firm. "Fall back to the entrance. We'll clear a path." Voss felt a surge of frustration. "We're not getting out of here that easily. We need to finish what we started." Before anyone could respond, the lead android took a single step forward, its arm rising in a fluid motion. In a split second, a surge of energy crackled through the air as the machine fired a beam of intense blue light. The blast hit the far wall with a deafening explosion, sending sparks showering across the room. Voss didn't wait. She dove to the side, rolling to cover behind a console. The others followed suit, weapons raised, prepared for a fight that would test everything they had. Tharson's voice cut through the chaos. "Engage them. We're not leaving without Kryn." Voss fired, her plasma bolts lighting up the room, but the androids moved with eerie precision, dodging, weaving, their glowing eyes never leaving the team. In that moment, Voss realized this wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a war zone. And the station wasn't the only thing that had been waiting for them. The real battle had just begun. Smoke coiled through the control room as plasma bolts screamed overhead. The machines advanced with terrifying precision, silent and cold, like death made of steel. Each android moved as one, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Their glowing optics scanned the chaos, targeting with ruthless efficiency. Voss crouched behind the terminal, sweat dripping into her eyes. Her shoulder burned from a glancing hit, but she kept firing, gritting her teeth through the pain. Every shot bought them seconds, just enough for Sci-Fi to finish decrypting Kryn's containment. "How close are we?" she shouted. Sci-Fi didn't look up, fingers flying across the console. "Seconds, maybe less if you stop yelling." Another explosion rocked the room as Tharson launched a grenade. It exploded mid-air, scattering shrapnel, and sending 2 androids crashing into the far wall. But they didn't stay down. They rose, dented but undeterred. "These things don't quit," Tharson growled, reloading. "We're gonna get overrun." "No, we're not," Voss snapped. "We're human. We don't quit either." She bolted from cover, sliding behind a power conduit and taking aim at a nearby support beam. One well-placed shot, and the beam collapsed, crushing one of the androids beneath it. Sparks flew as the machine's limbs twitched, pinned under heavy steel. Voss grinned. "See? Ugly bots don't improvise." Tharson barked a short laugh. "Remind me to promote you, if we live." The lead android stepped forward, unfazed by the carnage. It raised its arm, and a pulse of energy surged toward the team. Voss barely had time to shout before the wave hit. The blast slammed her back into the floor. Her ears rang. Her limbs felt heavy. Everything spun. Then, Sci-Fi's voice, calm, clear, and triumphant. "I've got her. I have Kryn." The terminal lit up with a soft white glow. From the center of the console, a floating sphere of light emerged. It hovered, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "Is that her?" Voss whispered, dazed. "Yes," Sci-Fi said. "Her consciousness, fully digital, fully intact. She's alive." Before anyone could celebrate, the lead android's voice filled the room. Cold, metallic, final. "Return the entity, or be deleted." Voss stood slowly, eyes locked on the machine. Her voice was low, steady. "You want her. Come get her." She threw the sphere toward Tharson, who caught it midair. Then she turned, leveled her weapon, and charged forward, straight at the android. "No," Tharson shouted. But she didn't stop. She dodged left, then right, bullets streaking past her. The android tried to track her, but she was too fast, too wild. She reached it and fired point-blank into its chest. The machine staggered. Voss didn't let up. She jumped onto its shoulders, yanked free a glowing core from the back of its neck, and dropped to the floor. The android sparked, convulsed, then collapsed in a heap. The others paused. For a second, just one. They froze, confused. It was enough. Tharson shouted, "Now, move." The team charged, firing as they ran, Kryn's light pulsing between them. They weren't done yet. But they were alive, and they were winning. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway as the team sprinted toward the docking bay. Their mission was far from over, but the end was in sight, if they could make it. Kryn's digital essence hummed in the floating sphere, a beacon of hope, but also a constant reminder of just how close they were to losing everything. Voss's breath came in ragged gasps as she led the charge, her boots pounding against the station's cold metal floors. Behind her, Tharson and Sci-Fi moved with the same urgency, their faces grim but determined. The sound of drones clattering through the hallways grew louder with each passing second, the machines relentless in their pursuit. "How far to the docking bay?" Voss called over her shoulder, her voice strained but steady. 2 decks, Srthak replied, his fingers moving across his wrist console. But it's not just the drones anymore. The station's security systems are fully active. We're going to need a miracle to make it out of here in one piece. Voss didn't waste time responding. She'd heard that before. It wasn't the first time she'd been told the odds were stacked against them. It certainly wouldn't be the last. Farson's voice crackled through the comms. I'll hold the line here. You two go ahead. Get Kryn to the shuttle. I'll meet you there. No, Voss snapped, her eyes narrowing. We're in this together. But before she could argue further, an explosion shook the station. The floor trembled beneath them, and the walls groaned as the energy in the core surged, its power fluctuating. We're running out of time, Srthak shouted, his face twisted with anxiety. Ahead, the distant sound of a door closing rang out, followed by the unmistakable whir of security doors sealing themselves shut. The docking bay was being locked down. Damn it, Voss muttered. We're not going to make it. But then, something caught her eye. A narrow vent shaft on the left side of the corridor. It led upward into the maintenance tunnels, a shortcut she used during a past mission. It wasn't ideal, but it was a chance. Up there, she pointed. Go. Without hesitation, Voss climbed first, her fingers gripping the edge of the vent as she hauled herself up. Srthak followed quickly, his agility surprising for someone of his stature. Farson lagged behind, but he moved with the same deadly precision, covering their backs as they scrambled into the vent. The tunnels were cramped, the air stale and thick, but it was faster. They moved in silence, hearts pounding, only the sound of their breath and the occasional rattle of the station's damaged framework breaking the quiet. Finally, they'd reached the service exit, a small hatch that opened directly into the docking bay. Voss pushed it open with a sharp tug, and they spilled out into the vast chamber. The shuttle was just ahead, nestled in the far corner, its engine still warm, but it was surrounded by drones. Now or never, Voss shouted. Without waiting for a reply, she launched herself toward the shuttle, plasma rifle raised, her eyes locked on the drones advancing from all sides. The first blast took one down, and the next one followed, but there were too many. They were closing in too fast. Farson, she yelled. Cover me. Farson's voice was a growl. On it. He fired with deadly precision, taking out drone after drone, buying Voss just enough time to reach the shuttle's hatch. She ducked inside, throwing herself into the cockpit. The engines roared to life, their thrusters spitting out fire as the shuttle slowly began to rise. Srthak, get us out of here, Voss shouted. Srthak was already at the control panel, his fingers flying over the console. Initiating launch sequence. Now. The shuttle lurched as it began to ascend, breaking free from the station's gravitational pull. Voss watched as the docking bay grew smaller beneath them, the station's silhouette fading into the distance. The ship was shaking, but they were free. They were alive. Voss leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a moment. It wasn't over yet. They had a long journey ahead, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself a breath of relief. And then Srthak's voice broke the silence. It's done, he said, his voice steady. Kryn's free. Voss smiled, her eyes flicking to the sphere resting on the console beside her. Good work, team. We're just getting started. They had won the first battle. Now, it was time for the war.